All right, friends, it's show 2 here on this delightful Thursday, August the 15th. And this is the Dan Titus episode we've been talking about all week long. Dan, of course, with fantasy basketball on the Yahoo side. He knows what's going on behind the scenes. Ooh. And he's going to pull back the curtain a little bit on today's episode, give you guys a look at what's going on at Yahoo Fantasy, what they're working on, what they're trying to implement, timelines on things, and frankly, how to even look at the Yahoo rankings board. That's coming up in just a matter of moments. First things first, howdy, everybody. Welcome to Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. I'm finally getting that show name right consistently without stopping myself beforehand. I am your host, Dan Besbris. You can follow me on Twitter at Dan Besbris, DanBesbris. You can also follow our network at Old Man Squad. Strong recommend. You'll get my episodes when they drop over there. You'll also meet all kinds of other amazing podcast hosts from across the sports landscape. It's not just basketball either. We got basketball, we got football, we got baseball. We got teams like the Kings, the Pels, fantasy football, dynasty basketball, rookies, college kids. We got culture. We got immaculate grid. And we got some other stuff in the works that'll be dropping as soon as next week. Probably 2, 3, 4 more shows even before the basketball season starts here. That's all on the Old Man Squad Sports Network. But enough about all that stuff. While you're liking, rating, and subscribing, because I know you guys are doing that to help us grow, while you're liking, rating, and subscribing, enjoy a couple of Dans just yelling at each other. This is where we go when we want the inside skinny. We're going Dans today. Only I want to do the Simpsons joke, the no homers club, but reversed on doesn't matter. Mr. Titus, Dan Titus, what's going on, my man? How are you?
What's up, Dan? Good to talk to you again. And man, we got some drafting news potentially coming up. And I don't know, now that the Olympics is over, I think we can finally point our attention to over analyzing what's going to be going on in fantasy basketball world for the next 2 months as we get geared up for the regular season here. Schedule drops in about an hour, which is super exciting. So yeah, really, really excited to talk hoops today.
Yes, it is a good day for it. You and I talked like 3-ish weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, and you gave us the Yahoo League start date. That has now come and gone. That was a week ago. And I have to do it. I have to just pump you for info because it's the first thing. First of all, for those that don't know, Dan is with Yahoo Fantasy. You're also on the Roto World Basketball Show, but I'm going to be squeezing you for Yahoo-related information. It's the question that everybody wants to know. You already told me, so I'm going to pretend to be shocked, but I know the answer already. When can we start mocking? Because, like the Chappelle Show itch going on right now. Yeah. When's the mock?
So we're a week from today. So this will go live on Thursday. So August 22nd is the date that we have circled on our calendars right now. So by the time we speak next week, man, hopefully we will be in a mock room somewhere on Yahoo, trying to determine and influence the ADPs of some players.
I know. This is like, so first of all, I don't want to jump over the fact that we're a week away from mocks. That's so awesome. There are going to be so many of those. By the way, for folks that are listening, watching, whatever, the pod, we have a lot of mocks going on this. I also asked folks to submit draft results. I thought that might be kind of a cool thing to do as well. Yeah. When you've got 12 competitive folks in it. So that's when mocks are coming. But I also want to talk to you about just like the Yahoo setup a little bit, because it comes up often and it's part of why everybody's always yelling about rankings. The other half is because ESPN rankings are all over the map. Funny. Insanity. Yeah, very funny. But the Yahoo pre-rank board, that's what dropped along with projections. You can hunt a little bit and you can find those, but the pre-rank, the X rank, the O rank, there's been a lot of names for it over the years. That's the thing that shows up in the draft room And you did a marvelous job while we were off air of explaining a little bit how that comes to be and frankly why some of the rankings seem so goofy. So, Dan, what is the pre-rank? And maybe there's no answer to the second half of this question, but why is it so important if it's as confusing as it is?
Yeah, so the pre-rank is a really interesting element to the draft process. And so, because we talked about this last time I was on, and we're going to release the game's going to be open in August, but you have to do a lot of back end testing. You have to make sure everything's working, and part of that is ensuring that the pre-ranks are loading properly. And little peek behind the curtain, pre-rank is a combination of points and category league ranks,
That's
which makes it
insanity, Dan.
super interesting but confusing probably for most people, because if you look at our numbers and our data in terms of what more players play in, they play in category leagues, but our default is points leagues.
Hmm.
So you have to appease both parties here. And I think it makes it a really interesting case for, if you're looking for value, if I'm high on Giannis in points leagues because he's one of the best, but he's not that great for category leagues, it's like, why would I have him ranked number 5? So having to explain that, I'm hoping that one day we'll get to a point where, maybe our draft software will recognize what format you're in, and then you will get populated the ranks that are pertaining to that particular format, whether it be categories or points leagues. But all that to be said, the rankings will change a lot. The draft partner that we use actually didn't have a lot of players in there. A lot of rookies were excluded, and I think that's just the first iteration of the batch of them trying to run this. But then also a very notable former All-Star was also exempt from the list by the name of Ja Morant. So
I assume you're talking about Ja being in the 300s.
yeah,
That'll
yeah.
probably change.
Yeah, and so tomorrow I'm actually going to come out with my first cut of the points rankings as well as the category rankings and the blended. So I think we'll see Ja significantly higher tomorrow. So
So there will be
yeah,
a new pre-rank board tomorrow.
should be worst case. You'll probably see it over the weekend. Just depends on the
Wow.
load time and all that stuff. But I think worst case by Monday, if you're drafting, we'll see a new pre-rank board that's more representative of the actual talent that is in the league currently.
That's actually really important to know because if anybody, and I know we're very early, and I would say I don't think anybody's really drafting right now, but obviously some people are because they've shown me their draft boards. If you're planning on drafting in the next 24 hours, be ready for the draft window to look pretty different because once that adjustment comes, you're going to see names that, we got used to particular guys. You were telling me off air that like LaMelo Ball is a name that's probably going to move in the next iteration.
Mm-hmm.
If you're used to seeing him go in the middle of the third round, once that pre-rank board moves him, that's basically closer now to where you're going to see a guy go. And I'm just pulling his name out of the sky. But this also works as an interesting segue. What are some of the things you've seen in this initial board that have jumped out at you and you've kind of thought, okay, we need to tweak this guy? Like, are there massive values that people basically have a 1-day timer on right now? Yeah.
One day, definitely John Morant. And you mentioned LaMelo Ball. I think that's a really good point because some recent news came out that he's going to be wearing an ankle brace, which I think is probably the best news that could ever have happened for him. I know he's really reluctant to do that in the past, and if he can keep his ankle straight, this on a per game value basis, this guy is a first round value that you were getting. If you were mocking, he was well into the 30s, so I think he could probably move to the front end of that third round, possibly sneak into a late second. Who knows? Another name on the list that I was kind of surprised about was Paul George. I think he should be a second round pick right now. He's kind of sitting outside in the early third. So I expect he will probably move up. One guy that I was expecting to move down slightly, Anthony Edwards.
Yeah.
And the reason I had Anthony Edwards kind of high initially was because I was actually going to write an article, and it might still come out a little bit. I'm still trying to figure out how I want to word it, but there's something about creating, like, fantasy is fun, right? We all want to win in the end, but there's some portion of it where it's like it's that much more of an enjoyable experience when you have like the faces of the league or people that are ascending to be great on your roster.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like he has all of the vibes of a player that should not justifiably go in the first round, but you want to have Anthony Edwards on your team. Same thing with, I think Jason Tatum is like, he's been slandered for, not having the aura to be, a face of this league. And fantasy would tell you that, yeah, he shouldn't be a first round pick. But if you're talking about a model of consistency and a floor of 70 plus games, why would you not take Jason Tatum? And Kristaps Porzingis is going to be out for a portion of the season, a significant portion of the season, especially early on. So there's a couple of names here of guys that like are probably ranked a little bit too high that I could probably give a little downtick a little bit. And then you'll see other players like Donovan Mitchell was a guy I think that was really low before. I think he was like, mid second. He's easily qualifiable for, an early second, late first. I think the back end of the first round is going to be super interesting because I think you could go a lot of ways. You can go veteran guys, you can go high upswing, upside guys. But yeah, it's going to be a really interesting turn. And I think one other name I wanted to flag was James Harden. Right now, I think he was kind of
Late.
in the late
Yeah.
third. He was early third, I want to say. Was he like in the 30s?
Yeah, 25.
Mhm.
Early third.
He's going to be a second round pick. I mean, I just don't see with Kawhi Leonard's health how he's not going to be.
Don't,
Yeah.
don't take that massive value off the board. Please leave him at 25.
Yeah, he was one of the guys like I identified as like an early winner of free agency just because, or the off season, just because there's just not a lot of who's going to take away from his usage rate if Kawhi Leonard isn't all the way there. Like I do have concerns about him returning to like being a 20-point scorer. I think those days may be done, but he can also be a double, 17, 10 assists, gives you the threes, gives you the free throw percentage, and a steal. So yeah, I think he could be easily a mid-second round pick when this is all said and done.
What's the appetite for his teammate Kawhi? He's very late in the first pre-ranks.
Yeah, I just don't have much information on Kawhi, so that's why I think he probably landed there because on a points perspective, he's not. He's probably more of a third round value, but categories he's first round. So how do you bridge that gap knowing the injury risk? And
Right.
yeah, I don't know where I'm going to end up landing. He's one of my toughest players to rank along with Joel Embiid just because the injury risk is so high. We know what they can do on a per game basis, but the risk, I just can't ignore the risk.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to probably end up in the late second, but right now I feel probably more comfortable taking him in the third.
We're talking to Dan Titus of Yahoo Fantasy, Dan Titus on Twitter. Always easy when folks have just their name as their Twitter handle. You mentioned the back end of the first round, and I think we all kind of knew it was going to be a little bit screwy. And then finally seeing the names lined up in front of us, it just looks 95 times screwier than we had ever imagined. What do you do there? Because just to quickly go through some of the names, you mentioned Joel Embiid, the injury risk there. I don't know if you throw Anthony Davis in that mix as well. Tatum, who's per game a little bit lower, but generally upright, just went through the finals. Anthony Edwards, who you already talked about. Trae Young is back up in that mix now with DeJounte Murray gone. The pre-rank, Domantas Sabonis is number 12 in pre-ranks right now. It feels like there's a hole you could punch in almost every one of those players. And I don't remember that there's always a drop off, but it kind of, in the last couple of years, it felt like there was like a first few and then like a next couple and then a next couple. And now it's like Wemby and Jokic, Luka and Shea, and then
good luck.
Yeah. What are you doing there? Are you going risk with mega upside, or are you going, the Trae, Tatum, that direction guys that'll probably stay on their feet most of the year?
Yeah, I mean, the other one, I mean, even Steph Curry, right? Like,
yeah,
he's a person that can win you two categories, but can he stay upright for more than 60 games? And in the new climate where I don't know the Warriors are going to be particularly as competitive as they were in the past. So I have been eyeing Trae Young a lot. I know people have soured on him because of the field goal percentage and potentially being able to have anyone, actually kind of like, who is his running mate right now? It's like Jalen Johnson, but I don't know. I just can't really project how the Atlanta Hawks are going to look without DeJounte Murray there, a guy that was absorbing 25% usage. But I would expect Trae Young to be really good. North of 30% usage rate. One of the only guys in the league right now, besides Tyrese Halliburton, that can average 20 and 10. I like Trae Young. I think he'll be good, but we have seen him be more of like in his best probably a top 20 guy versus a top 10 to top 12. So I understand why the sticker price might be a little bit rich, seeing him in the back end of the first. Um, I don't think you can go wrong for the old man squad. I don't think you could go wrong with Kevin Durant, right? Like Kevin
I,
Durant somehow
you
still,
you preempted my next question, which was going to be the front end of the second round is littered with old dudes. Do you
yeah,
just leap over some of the young guys and go to them instead?
yeah. I mean, I think you could probably do a combination of both. Like, Tyrese Halliburton's an amazing fantasy player, but when Pascal Siakam came there and he was injured for the second half of the season, it's kind of a different Tyrese Halliburton. He wasn't that first round grade that we anticipated him to be all season. So like he's another guy that I think carries some risk. You talked about Anthony Davis. Obviously, we know the injury risk there. This is mucky, man. This is Kyrie.
It really
Kyrie Irving is another guy that easily could be a first round pick, but he just had wrist surgery over in the offseason. We haven't really gotten an update. I expect he'll be healthy for the start of the season, but we don't know. So I think he's going to probably be lower than his value actually probably should be. Um, this is so like Jalen Brunson, now the Nova Knicks. Like, where does his usage go? Does his points go down? I don't think he's going to be averaging 26 points a game next year. So this back end, Damian Lillard, haven't mentioned him. It's going to be
they're old
so wild. So that's why all this to say, the mock drafting is going to be especially important because someone's going to have the fallout here. Someone's going to fall lower than what their real value is. And I think that's where this is going to be really fun, trying to identify who in those back end of the first, early second kind of falls down the draft board and where we can take advantage.
Do you think, and again, I don't want you to tip your hand too much on the changes coming in the next update.
Mm-hmm.
Are these names going to shuffle? It feels like even if they did shuffle, it would just be like one up here, one down there, two up here,
Mm-hmm.
one down here. And it's like you still got the same mush mosh. They just sort of like rotate in the mosh pit.
Right. Yeah. I think that's, you stated that well. But like someone that I saw, like Kristaps Porzingis, like I think right now he's sitting at like in the 40s.
Yeah, that's
He would never. He's going to be far lower than that.
But at the top of the board, not. I mean, you mentioned Anthony Edwards, but like so many people want him.
They want him there.
Yeah, you can't move him down much.
Get there. I think he's going to get there just off the strength of his aura, like his vibe. Like he's an exciting player, funny, charismatic, could easily be a face of the league type of guy. Like, and I think it's probably something similar to the way Ja Morant used to be drafted. Never really a good fantasy player in terms of per game rank for category leagues, but hey, you get a nightly highlight of him dunking on somebody. It's like, oh man, I got one of the funnest players in the leagues, right? So, I think the most overdrafted person in terms of value is probably going to be a combination of Anthony Edwards and Jason Tatum. But that's not to say that Anthony Edwards can't become. It's going to be hard. I think he can be the top 15. I think he can get top 15. I don't know if he's going to crack the top 12. It is, but I don't think we've also seen the ceiling for the ceiling for him. So Tatum is. I think Tatum, he is who he is. So I feel like if you draft him, you're probably a Celtics guy that just wants consistency.
Yeah, you want to have a guy. You're like, I don't care if my first round pick is number 15. I just want him to play 72 games.
Yes.
And I mean, he's Tatum's a little bit more roto-y than head to head in that way, that he doesn't have like those two mega power categories like a lot, or 3 or 4, whatever it is. So that maybe can kind of color how folks are doing it. What about some of the guys that made that giant leap last year? Where do you see them going this season? I would say notably Chet Holmgren. I mean, leap from non-existent to existent. Yeah. Tyrese Maxey now with Paul George in town. Scotty Barnes was, for me, the most surprising mega leap from last year. Like Maxey, you could kind of see coming a little bit more clearly. Do you think those guys continue to move up, or do they take a step back?
So Scotty, I saw in a couple early mocks that we had this off season, was going early to mid second, and I don't mind that, to be honest, because I think that Scotty Barnes has the skill set, at least for category leagues, to be right in that range as a top 20 guy. He's so versatile, like the defensive stats that he has, and he gives you the scoring, the rebounds, and the assists. I don't think Emmanuel quickly will impact his usage rate too much. He's still top dog in Toronto, even though they kind of spread it out. So I don't mind him there. Tyrese Maxey is really interesting because while I could see why people would sour on him in terms of like, is he going to be able to produce the numbers that he did last year now with Paul George coming in? I still feel like he's worthy of a third round pick. Mainly because you just can't rely on Joel Embiid to stay healthy for, more than 60 games. And if that's the case, Paul George and I think Tyrese Maxey is probably a more prolific scorer than Paul George at this point. I think they'll both have around 5 assists a game because they play with such a dominant force in Joel Embiid. There's going to be some easy assists there, but I think Tyrese Maxey is actually going to slide more than I would. I would be more than happy to take Tyrese Maxey as my first point guard or second shooting guard, whatever, how you ever want to, do your roster construction. But I think he's going to be a value because he's so efficient for his size and like the way that the Sixers offense kind of generates and runs through him, Embiid, and now Paul George. So yeah, I like Tyrese Maxey a lot in the third. Who was the other guy you mentioned?
Chet Holmgren.
Chet. So Chet should easily be a second round pick. I'm not worried about Alex Caruso coming in there. Obviously, SGA is who he is. Jalen Williams is a guy that I think I'm probably ranking a little bit lower than consensus, mainly because there's just a lot of mouths to feed, and he really just needs to up his playmaking. And I don't know that he's going to be able to do that right now. I think it definitely helps that Josh Giddey is gone. But I think he's a little bit overdrafted. Like I wouldn't take him in the third round. I think he's more of a fourth round guy personally. Whereas Chet, if his blocks continue and can shoot a high percentage, which I think he will. Isaiah Hartenstein definitely impacts the rebounding slightly, but I think it also could help him similar to the way Zach Edey is going to probably help Jaren Jackson Jr. get to back where he was. Because I think if he can play the 4, you allow him to be a little bit more rangy and possibly get more blocks onto the help side, kind of playing like a safety more as just an anchor of the paint. So I think that Chet Holmgren's like an awesome second round pick that I wouldn't be afraid to take.
Interesting.
Mid second, I think is fair, but like just don't expect this is a categories thing, right? So 15
right.
points, 7 rebounds, upwards of 2 blocks with strong shooting peripherals. That's a solid player right there. Kind of like an Evan Mobley-ish, but I think he'd be better than Evan Mobley.
We now, again, talking to Dan Titus of Yahoo Fantasy, we now finally know after talking the entire offseason the general price tag on Jalen Johnson for this coming season, and it is not surprisingly quite high. Are you comfortable drafting him in the middle of the third round? Because that's kind of where he's going these days.
I am, just based off of like what I've seen from the Hawks right now. Like if Dyson Daniels is starting at the 2, which is the presumed thing, if not, it's Bogdanovich. I think he's probably a better case for the 6th man on that team. DeAndre Hunter doesn't really do anything for me. We know Clint Capella is. So I think he's going to be the second option on offense. And we've already seen what he can do in terms of his playmaking, his efficiency, his defensive metrics. Kind of gives me like poor man Sean Marion vibes of sorts. So,
oh man, what a great fantasy player back in the day. I mean, great regular player, but
so good. And like I like the jack of all trades type of players, right? Like that's what I'm really searching for, especially in category leagues. Like, can you give me a little bit of everything across categories? So I understand the price tag might feel rich, but I'd be willing to take him just based off the skill set that he provides. He's not going to give you a 20-point scorer, not going to be 10 rebounds a game, but I'd be more than happy if he can get to like 17, 7, 4 with the stocks and the threes. Like that's a very good category fantasy player right there.
1 or 2 questions before I let you get back to your day. I mentioned Kawhi Leonard with that pre-rank in the 40s. Right there next to him is Jimmy Butler. Is it more of a health thing with Jimmy? Has the universe just soured on whatever Jimmy Butler is? I mean, again, like you know better than I do where he's going to be on the next pre-rank board, but is he another one that's going to be kind of low this year?
I think he is, because I think, unfortunately for Jimmy, his best attributes is that he's a playoff performer. Like
yeah, we need regular season
playoff dog, but like regular season, Jimmy is just not. He actually played more games than I expected last year, but like I don't know, the offseason, like I feel like it's like the Dallas Cowboys situation with CeeDee Lamb. It's like we want to pay you, we're going to pay you, but we don't know when we're going to pay you. And like right now, your asking price is just too high, and in Jimmy's case, he's too old to want to justify this money. And so if this is going to continue to bleed into the training camp, like I just feel like it's going to be approaching that holdout. I'm kind of here, but I'm kind of not until you give me what I want. I'm kind of out on that situation just from the optics. Um, I just don't like when disgruntled stars, especially as theatric as Jimmy Butler has been in the past. He's not afraid to speak his mind. I think he can kind of. I don't know if he doesn't get paid. I just don't feel like he's going to be extremely motivated to play his brand of basketball in the regular season. And it's not like the Miami Heat don't have other players to rely on. They still have Tyler Hero there. Jaime Jaquez is a guy that I'm pretty high on this year. Could definitely step up in his place if he decides to hold out. Bam Adebayo is a solid NBA player. So I just feel like Jimmy's approaching that point of like, is it the cliff where he starts to decline? We have the money situation involved. It just doesn't seem like all things considered, the scenario that I want to buy into for fantasy and back in a player who's going to cost you, somewhere in the third round there, fourth round.
I'm going to bug you with one more question about late players. But before we do that, promo time. Dan, what you got cooking right now? What can everybody check out?
Yeah, so we talked about it earlier. Mock draft season opens up on Yahoo Fantasy in
Yes.
1 week, August 22nd. So make sure you guys start drafting. Check out all my ranks. I'm going to have a ton of content dropping over the course of the next 2.5 months. So just continue to tap into Yahoo Fantasy. And when you get a chance, when we get back on air, still trying to figure out when that date will be, but Roto World Basketball Show will be gearing up in the coming weeks. So just continue to tap in with us there. And if you see Dan doing any kind of Yahoo mocks, I might slide in there as well. So don't be surprised. We have some work to do. So just continue to follow Yahoo Fantasy. A lot of cool updates. Fantasy football obviously is around the corner. So appreciate everyone's support and engagement with Yahoo Fantasy.
Yes, continue to. I'm always banging the Yahoo Fantasy drum. I find it to be the simplest to use. That's the one I'm almost always going to go to. I know
Especially
that
on desktop.
Yes, and you know me, I'm an old man. I'm not I don't know how to use these little things you hold in your hand. In fact, I'm getting text messages. I don't the hell with it. I'll figure it out. Give me all my desktop. No one ever uses the button. Like everyone at the end of Roto is like, Dan, how are you always so spot on with your games played cap? I'm like, because it's right freaking there on the screen. And then people are like, oh, I'm like trying to find it on my phone. Like, don't boot it up on a screen. Who are you looking at after 100? Is there anybody that's jumping out at you right now?
After 100, let's see here.
Well, you actually mentioned
RJ Barrett. Disgusting, I know it may seem.
What?
RJ Barrett. I love what I thought he looked great in the Olympics. He was awesome for Toronto at the end after the trade deadline. His free throw percentage is awful, but everything else, man. I mean, he's not going to shoot 56, 58% from the field. That's not sustainable, but if he can stay around 48%, I'm cool with that. And he just seems very comfortable playing, in his hometown, and the system, I think it really bodes well for him. I think it showcases what he can do, like way better than what Tibbs was trying to get out of him. So right now, man, he's like the cheapest 20-point scorer you can get, after top 100. And I think he'll actually be more efficient. And if he can have that efficiency, I mean, I think he could finish as like a top set, probably inside the top 90. And I mean, you can get him in like the 11th, 12th round. Like no one likes drafting RJ Barrett. So that's just a disgusting name. I think who else is out there?
That was a gross one.
It's so gross. It's so gross. But points leagues, hey,
that's true.
Don't be surprised when RJ Barrett is like creeping up in my probably like 70s territory. Khalil Ware is one guy I'm super intrigued by from a rookie standpoint. I think that there's going to be a case to be made at some point where Spo decides to start him alongside Bam Adebayo. And just from what we saw in Summer League and just how much the team has been raving about his development and what he can bring as a stretch five, that they haven't really had a guy to really have that support alongside Bam yet. I think he's going to get minutes. And then this may be like a mid-season grow as you kind of progress, gradually through the ranks here. But, Derek Lively appeared by the time he came, he was a top 100 guy. And I think we could see a similar progression with Kalo Ware. Like I think he's going to be a really good fantasy player just in terms of his ability to get rebounds, block shots, and then also he can stretch the floor better than a lot of young bigs can here. So I'm eyeing him and Trace Jackson Davis. I think he's also going to be outside the top 100, who I think has an opportunity to be really good for the Warriors here, because Kevon Looney's kind of definitely hit his cap in terms of being a starting center in this league. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna be watching him too.
Fun stuff. Dan, thank you so much. I'm sorry that, behind the scenes, I'm like racing to try to get things together. I got a kid who's sick by the fourth freaking day of school.
Oh,
already.
Man. Prayers up. I know how it is, man. The kiddos and going back to school, we just have to endure. Like, come on, get those antibodies up, fueling them with orange juice, get the vitamin C, get a little ginger, and everything we can to just prevent them from being home. But
the nice thing is that as they age up, they can function a little bit more on their own. So there was only one. You guys may have all seen me turn my head to the side. My kid was just letting me know that the Brewers hit a home run against the Dodgers, and he was upset about it. I was like, God damn it. Don't tell me that now. I'm in the middle of a show. I'm trying to keep my energy high. Now I'm mad. Everybody go check out Dan Titus at Yahoo Fantasy, on Twitter at Dan Titus. I have like 100 more questions that I wanted to ask, but we can do it on the next one. Which, can I bug you again in a couple weeks?
Absolutely.
Hell yeah.
Bug away.
Thanks, Dan. And there you go. That's the great Dan Titus. So take a moment here as we hit the tail end, not the very end, I guess, but heading towards the conclusion of our show. Follow Dan on Twitter at Dan Titus. Follow me at Dan Bespris and at Old Man Squad. Quick reminder again to please hit that thumbs up button and to subscribe. And if you have a moment, particularly over on Apple Podcasts, that one seems to be the hardest one to really force through. Please drop that 5-star review. Plop that 5-star review in there. It ends up being a really big deal towards everything we're doing. Helping us grow. That's where I need you guys. That's where I need you guys right now. Really interesting stuff from Dan on that show as you sort of explore the behind the scenes of Yahoo Fantasy, how the board gets built, why the pre-rank board seems so weird. Still, by the way, way better than anything ESPN puts out, but also big adjustment coming either tomorrow or over the weekend. So let's get that information in right now. We'll have a retool starting potentially over the weekend or first thing next week. We'll go through the new board and make sure that we got all of our stuff squared away. So this is going to be the battle throughout all of draft season. They put out a board. We analyze it. We try to find the values. We find the hits. We find the misses. We try to get what we can out of it, figure out who we're tracking, who we expect to go up, who to go down, and then they shuffle it. And usually it's about once every 2 weeks. This one coming quicker. Sounds like this will be, 7-8 days. But a lot of that, as Dan explained, is because that first board, they were just big oversights. They wanted to get those fixed, rookies, John Morant, things of that nature. They get them in a more reasonable spot before a larger portion of the populace actually starts to do their drafting. Wanted to mention to you guys that if you're looking for the other ways, like the board we're talking about, the pre-rank board, I find the easiest place to find that is to hover over the draft menu in Yahoo and choose draft analysis. How are your picks doing? That gives you the pre-ranks. Once ADP data is available, it'll give that as well. If you want, you can go to the player page and sort by projected, which is going to be remaining games, and then in parentheses, proj for projected. That's where you can see Yahoo's projections and how those differ from the pre-rank board, because they're very much not the same thing. And you can kind of see a little bit of like what Dan was talking about. Okay, this is what we actually think is going to happen. This is when we have to smoosh it all together with points leagues, with 8-cat, with 9-cat, all of that stuff. He was talking about how someday maybe it'll reflect the type of league you're in. Like if you're in a 9-category league, it'll give you the 9-category board. I'm actually okay with it flashing the pre-ranks board, because if I'm in a 9-cat league, points league guys are going to get auto-drafted early in leagues, or they're just going to get drafted by people that don't know any better. 8-cat type of guys are going to go a little earlier that sort of don't know any better, or perhaps they're punting it, so maybe they do know better. But right now, it does create a little bit of a value bubble. So that's okay in my eyes. I'm all right with it. However, there are other things that can be worked on, and Dan was talking about that as well. They're working on things related to injuries and just ways of making the system function better, ways of making the system work better. Thanks to Dan Titus again. Thank you to all of you guys for watching and listening and subscribing and all that amazing stuff. Tomorrow, we'll be talking to Josh Lloyd. We'll also get one other show in there. It'll probably be my 51 through 75 on the current board, or if the board changes, we'll start rehashing it again. We'll get all that good stuff to you. I'm Dan Vespris. Thanks again for checking it out. We'll see you guys tomorrow.